Imagine holding the title of an unbeatable doctor, unrivaled and unmatched in every way, then suddenly getting thrown into a whole new world. But everyone around laughs, thinking you're weak, clueless that soon you'll make them all eat their own words. The story kicks off with a boy named Pharma, once dismissed as hopeless by the world. Everything changed the day he watched the most important person in his life slip away, taken by an incurable disease. That day, something inside him snapped. He made a silent promise to the heavens that he would become the kind of doctor the world had never seen and prevent anyone else from enduring the pain he had felt. Years passed, and Pharma didn't just keep his promise, he shattered every expectation. He became the most brilliant pharmacist on the planet. But behind the miracles, Pharma hardly slept, just 1 hour a day, sacrificing rest for relentless research. Then, one day, after setting his alarm like always, something unexpected happened. He woke up, but not in his lab, in another unknown place. There was a girl in front of him, a stranger. His surroundings were unfamiliar, elegant, and eerily calm. Confused, he staggered toward the window and stared out in disbelief. This wasn't his world, and the body he now inhabited, it wasn't his either. At first, he assumed it was a vivid dream, but the girl, later introduced as Talon, mentioned something odd. She claimed he'd been struck by lightning the previous day, and that must have scrambled his mind. That's when reality began to sink in. Somehow, Pharma had been transported into another world and another body. Trying to play along, he asked for her name and received a crash course in his new life. Apparently, he now belonged to a noble family. A grand palace, fancy clothes, and a life of luxury were his new reality. But more surprising was the family legacy. Every single member was a royal physician, highly respected and absurdly skilled. Talon reintroduced him to his new relatives. Lord Byron, the kingdom's top physician and his supposed father, Lady Lisa, his kind mother, Mila, his younger sister, and his older brother Vero, who was currently on an expedition beyond the kingdom's borders. The entire family was made up of medical prodigies, and they didn't rely on science alone. No, this world had something extra, sacred powers. When Pharma asked what that meant, Talon looked at him like he'd asked how to breathe. She reminded him that he had once been incredibly talented in water magic. But if he couldn't demonstrate that gift now, it wouldn't end well. Nobles were expected to wield their elemental powers, and without them, he'd be cast out, maybe even disowned. Panicking, Pharma played the amnesia card. He claimed the lightning had scrambled his memories, hoping it would buy him time to figure things out. Alone in his room, he sat down and thought deeply. How exactly did water magic work? In a desperate experiment, he visualized the molecular structure of water, and that's when it happened. A strange energy coursed through his body. Water burst out like a geyser, unstoppable, wild. He rushed to the window, yelling as gallons of water erupted and soaked the entire garden. He eventually managed to stop it, drenched and startled. Outside, Talon stood dripping wet, but surprisingly joyful. She believed he had finally remembered his powers. But Pharma wasn't done being amazed. He soon discovered another trick. With his left hand, he could create metal. With his right, he could erase it completely. Alchemy and magic in perfect balance. Then came a knock at the door. He quickly wiped away the evidence before Talon entered. She told him that Lord Byron wanted to see him. A simple checkup, she claimed, but Pharma suspected otherwise. Before leaving, Talon asked if he still remembered his medical knowledge. Byron was famous for tossing out pop quizzes on rare treatments, and failure wasn't an option. Meeting his family, Pharma tried to act normal. Byron seemed pleased at first, until he abruptly asked how to create a specific healing ointment used for deep wounds. Without missing a beat, Pharma rattled off the procedure in perfect detail. Byron nodded, satisfied. He told Pharma to continue training with Noor, his personal tutor. Noor, once Byron's top student, was a powerful blend of stern mentor and secret genius. She trained Pharma in both medicine and magic, but she quickly sensed something off. His calm demeanor, the way he spoke, the subtle shifts in his expression, it wasn't the same Pharma she once knew. She asked if he even remembered her. He gave a half-truth. The lightning had changed him, maybe even caused amnesia. Noor smiled gently. She accepted the story and offered to start his lessons again from scratch, confident he would remember everything in time. And so, the training began anew. Noor explained that their world revolved around 5 elemental magics: water, fire, earth, air, and the rarest of all, void. Just as Noor was explaining the 5 elemental magics, Pharma suddenly interrupted, asking about void magic. Her expression shifted into a cautious smile. She admitted that, to be honest, no one really knew. It was something whispered in ancient scriptures and sacred scrolls, but she personally believed it was a myth. Still curious, Pharma asked if anyone had ever possessed the ability to create materials at will. Noor stopped in her tracks, glaring at him like he just claimed to be a god. She dismissed the idea immediately, declaring it utterly impossible, but Pharma remained silent. He already knew he could. To avoid more strange questions, Noor took him down to the riverbank for a practical lesson. She brought up the topic of magic staffs, tools that enhance one's magical abilities and make training easier. Pharma vaguely remembered seeing one, but hadn't realized it was his. Without hesitation, Noor handed him her own staff and told him to create a water spear aimed at the river. He had no clue what that meant, so she showed him. A graceful surge of magic burst from her staff and struck the water like a missile. It looked easy enough. Pharma gave it a try. The result, not a water spear, a full-blown tsunami. The entire riverbank exploded under the force of the wave. Horrified, Pharma dropped the staff, and the chaos stopped instantly. Noor stood speechless. She stared at the destruction and asked when he had gained that kind of power. Without waiting for an answer, she pulled out a magical device used to measure a person's energy levels. The moment Pharma touched it, it shattered into pieces. Noor trembled. Nothing about this was normal. Suddenly, a strange light glowed from Pharma's shoulder. Noor's breath caught in her throat. It was one of the sacred seals written about in forgotten scriptures, symbols tied to divine power. They continued walking, but Noor began squinting. Her glasses had broken during the chaos, and she could barely see. Pharma offered a suggestion, a trick to restore her vision. At first, she thought he was teasing her, but she followed his instructions anyway. Her vision sharpened instantly. Stunned, Noor turned to him in disbelief. But Pharma was even more shocked by his next discovery. He had awakened a new ability. Simply by looking at someone, he could detect injuries within their body, down to the exact location and nature of the ailment. It was as if he had developed a divine diagnosis tool in his eyes. As Pharma explained what he saw, Noor suddenly backed away, her face pale. She had noticed something chilling. His shadow wasn't being reflected on the ground. She froze, then collapsed in fear. When Pharma tried to help, she screamed and ran from him, fleeing the entire area. The next day, Lord Byron sat in his office informing Pharma of troubling news. Noor had fallen seriously ill. A fever had taken over her body, and she had even submitted her resignation. Byron asked if Pharma had any idea what had happened. Pharma thought carefully, then claimed he wasn't the reason behind it. Byron nodded silently and handed him some medicine along with a sealed letter, asking him to visit Noor and check on her condition. Pharma took the medicine but examined it closely. He quickly recognized it was just a basic nutritional supplement. It wouldn't help someone suffering from severe stress and fever. So he decided to prepare a proper remedy himself, one tailored to her condition. Later, when he arrived at Noor's home, he was met with a scene more fitting for a spy thriller than a friendly visit. Noor was hiding behind a metallic shield, speaking to him through a locked door. Her voice trembled as she accused him of coming to silence her forever. In her mind, she had discovered his terrible secret, and now he had come to erase her. Pharma was baffled. He asked what kind of nonsense she was talking about and reminded her that he was only following his father's orders to check on her health. He had brought 2 doses, one from Byron and the other, one he had personally prepared. But Noor, clearly in panic mode, fell to the floor and began crying. She was convinced the medicine was poisoned. She begged him not to kill her and swore she would never reveal what she had seen. Pharma tried to calm her down, explaining that he was the one who needed help. He confessed that he didn't understand the nature of his powers and couldn't control them. That was exactly why he needed her. She was the only person who had witnessed what he could do, and might be the only one who could help him learn to manage it. To ease the tension, he pulled out a small bouquet of flowers he had brought and placed it near the door. He told her that he wasn't trying to force her into anything. Whether she helped or not, he just wanted to thank her for everything. Then, he left. That night, Noor sat alone thinking. His words echoed in her mind. Despite her fear, a part of her knew he was telling the truth. He wasn't a monster. He was a frightened boy holding a power that could collapse a kingdom. The next morning, Pharma was strolling through the palace garden when a familiar voice called out. It was Noor. She had returned, and with renewed resolve. She told him they would begin training immediately. If he didn't learn how to control his powers, he might accidentally destroy everything around him. Pharma was overwhelmed. Grateful and relieved, he followed her to a distant training site far from the city. The moment they started, it became clear his power was off the charts. The training ground looked like a battlefield by the end. Afterward, Pharma returned to the palace and sat alone on the stone steps. He began using his holy eye to quietly scan the nearby servants. Every time he identified an illness, the affected area on their bodies glowed with a faint white light, confirmation of his diagnosis. Even Talon, the ever-cheerful maid, wasn't spared. Her hands glowed faintly, worn out from long hours of labor. And thus, Pharma's journey to master his powers had truly begun, not as a miracle doctor from another world, but as a healer, reborn with abilities that could change this one. After quietly scanning all the palace servants, Pharma headed straight to his father's lab. He had recorded every condition, every symptom, and now it was time to act. First up was Talon. With precise focus, he began crafting each treatment. Missing ingredients didn't slow him down. He simply synthesized them himself, using his knowledge and mysterious powers. Hours passed, but Pharma stayed locked in, brewing remedies until the final formula was complete. When the medicines were ready, he personally delivered Talon's dose. He handed it over, casually mentioning it was for the injury in her hands. She blinked in disbelief, touched beyond words. One by one, he visited the other servants, giving each of them the medicine tailored for their exact condition. What followed was nothing short of emotional chaos. Then Talon dropped a truth bomb. She explained that commoners like them had never received treatment before. High-ranking doctors weren't permitted to examine them, and even if they did, the costs were impossible to afford. Pharma stood in shock. This wasn't just about medicine, it was a system rigged against the poor. He muttered a quiet vow. Disease doesn't care whether someone is royalty or a street cleaner. Everyone deserves a chance to be healed. Not long after, Byron summoned him. When Pharma entered the room, his expression shifted. Both parents looked unwell. Byron explained that Pharma's sister, Mila, had contracted a serious and highly contagious skin disease. There was no cure and she had been placed in isolation. No one was allowed near her. But Pharma wasn't just anyone. He returned to his room and immediately started researching. Based on Byron's description, he quickly diagnosed the illness. It was a disease that had only recently been cured in his own world, just before his previous life ended. With no time to waste, he created the needed medicine from scratch. Even the rarest materials he produced on his own. Under cover of night, he sneaked into Mila's room. Sitting beside her, he reassured her softly, asking her to keep his visit a secret. Byron would be furious if he found out. When he said he'd brought medicine, Mila groaned and hid under the sheets. She hated the taste. Pharma chuckled and revealed a surprise. This time, the medicine was candy-flavored. She peeked out, suspicious. But when he fed her a dose, her face lit up. It was sweet, literally and figuratively. The girl was delighted. The next day, Byron and Pharma returned to Mila's room together. To everyone's shock, she was completely healed. Not a trace of the illness remained. Byron was baffled. No one had ever recovered from that disease this quickly. But Mila kept her promise. She didn't tell them a thing. Later that evening, Pharma sat quietly in his study. Using his powers, he constructed a microscope capable of viewing viruses on a molecular level. He began to analyze them, preparing for future battles. Suddenly, there was a knock. The head servant arrived in a rush, informing him that Byron needed him urgently. Within minutes, Pharma was standing beside his father, who looked utterly exhausted. The royal palace had summoned them. The princess was critically ill. Once inside, they were greeted by the princess's personal physician, Keen, who led them to her room. It was chaos. A swarm of doctors filled the space, whispering quietly with grim faces. Byron stepped in, took one look at the princess, barely breathing, and got to work. He collected a blood sample, used his diagnostic magic, and quickly made his call. There was no hope. He told Keen that the best they could do now was ease her suffering. Pharma froze. He couldn't believe his father was giving up. Byron returned with a painkiller and gently administered it. The princess, barely able to speak, asked if she'd recover. Byron lied. He said of course. But Pharma had already activated his holy eye. What he saw confirmed his worst fear. She had been struck by a lethal lung disease known as the death sickness. In his mind, he began forming a treatment plan. It was risky, but it might work. Just then, the doors slammed open. A little boy ran to the princess's side, sobbing. It was her son, crying out for her to stay with him. Pharma stepped forward. He asked the princess to let him take over her treatment and personally guide her to recovery. Byron exploded in rage. He shouted at Pharma to stay in his place, but the princess silenced everyone with a single command. She said she knew who to trust. The others had given up. Pharma had not. He was granted full permission. Rushing to the palace's laboratory, Pharma didn't waste a second. He sealed the doors with a towering wall of ice, locking everyone out. Then he began sketching the chemical formula, his mind moving faster than ever. Just when he finished, the ice wall shattered behind him. Byron stormed in, eyes blazing. He demanded to know what Pharma was doing. Pharma replied calmly, he was making medicine to save the princess. But Byron lost control. He shouted that the disease was incurable, and that Pharma's so-called cure might end up killing her. Then, in a blind fury, he tore Pharma's notes and struck him, convinced his son was preparing poison. Pharma didn't retaliate, not at first. But then, without chanting a single word or raising a staff, he summoned a massive ice wall with just his will. Byron stepped back in awe. That kind of magic. It was impossible. No incantation, no staff. He stared at Pharma and asked the question that had been burning inside him. Who was this boy really? Pharma remained silent. Then, Byron spotted something. A small notebook filled with complex chemical formulas, each one addressing a disease previously deemed incurable. Finally, he noticed the holy seal glowing faintly on Pharma's shoulder. Byron asked when it had appeared. Pharma answered simply, ever since the lightning strike, everything had changed. And finally, Byron believed him. Pharma was no ordinary boy. His powers were beyond anything his father had ever seen. And so, with urgency in his voice, Pharma told them to finish the medicine quickly because time wasn't on their side. Just then, he dispelled the icy barrier in front of him without even breaking a sweat. His father, Biran, stood there frozen, not by the ice, but by sheer disbelief. What in the world had his son become? Without wasting another second, Pharma focused on preparing the medicine meant for the princess. After carefully finishing the formula, he stepped out of the lab, his face hidden under a protective mask, and headed straight toward the princess's chambers. But before giving her the treatment, he had something to show her. Using a microscope he had built with his own hands, Pharma demonstrated the real culprit behind the illness. He instructed the princess to look through the lens toward the light. Then, he asked a servant to bring a candle closer to illuminate the view. And that's when the shock hit. The princess recoiled in horror. Right in front of her, countless bacteria swam across her field of vision, the true monsters causing her illness. She immediately called Kane and handed him the microscope. The moment he peered inside, he too froze in astonishment. None of the doctors present could believe what they were seeing. This bizarre device, this invention, wasn't magic. It was science. Pharma calmly broke the silence, explaining that a virus had invaded her lungs, unleashing hordes of aggressive bacteria that multiplied rapidly. But he had managed to develop a treatment that would defeat the infection completely, on one condition: the princess had to take the medicine consistently for 6 months. Though the timeline sounded long, it promised full recovery and a stronger body than before. To prove its safety, Pharma poured 2 glasses of the medicine and drank one himself in front of everyone. He assured her that he would personally oversee her recovery throughout the entire treatment period. Afterward, the doctors swarmed him like bees, firing off questions: how he built the microscope, what the medicine contained, and more. Not long after, Biran was seen sitting with Pharma, sharing ideas and thoughts. It was clear he was growing prouder of his son by the minute. During their talk, Pharma mentioned that he planned to make the formula public so it could help everyone in need. But Biran warned him that doing so could be dangerous. Pharma might become a target, but he promised to stand by his son no matter what. Later that day, Pharma visited the palace again to check on the princess's condition. Before he could even enter her room, a servant named Ars pulled him aside. He whispered that the princess had decided to reward him handsomely. Pharma looked surprised, almost confused. Ars couldn't believe his reaction. He reminded Pharma that he had saved the princess's life when no one else could. A reward was the least he deserved. Ars asked if he wanted wealth, power, or both, but Pharma's answer took him off guard. Pharma said his only dream was to open a clinic where anyone, rich or poor, could get treatment without worrying about money or status. Soon after, Pharma checked on the princess and was relieved to see her completely healthy. She expressed her gratitude, saying that it wasn't just the medicine that saved her, it was his words, his presence, and the hope he gave her. At that point, Pharma stood and asked her to imagine what would have happened if she were just an ordinary citizen. He reminded her that many poor people needed that same hope, and before leaving, he insisted she continue the full course of treatment until the end. Months passed. The princess had fully recovered. One day, while sitting with Biran in her palace office, she told him that he and Pharma must attend a royal celebration in honor of her recovery the following day. When the day arrived, Biran and Pharma walked into the grand hall and were stunned. It was packed with nobles, doctors, and important figures from across the kingdom. Then the princess appeared, healthy, radiant, and regal. She greeted Biran warmly, thanked him for everything, and granted him the entire Arcel region, famous for its rare medicinal herbs. And then, the room went quiet as she called Pharma's name. He stood frozen in disbelief, but eventually walked forward. There, before the crowd, the princess declared his promotion from apprentice to royal physician. She gave him the royal insignia and issued an official order. A personal pharmacy would be built for him, right in the heart of the royal capital. This was the moment Pharma had dreamed of. Soon after, a group of expert craftsmen arrived at his home. They announced that, by royal command, construction of his clinic would begin immediately. Pharma got nervous and asked for time to prepare. Just then, Noor walked in and announced that her father had assigned her to stay with Pharma until the clinic was completed. He tried to explain that he needed a few days to finalize the design, but Noor stared at him and asked if he had lost his mind. According to the law, if the workers didn't start building immediately, they could be executed. No pressure, right? Realizing he had no choice, Pharma sat down, grabbed a pen, and started sketching out the clinic. Construction began at once. While the workers bustled around, one of them asked Pharma what name he wanted on the clinic sign. He paused and said he remembered a lot of names from his previous parallel world. That was all it took. The worker sprinted over to the signboard and proudly wrote, "The Parallel World Clinic." Everyone was confused. Was he serious or just joking? But to Pharma's surprise, Noor actually liked the name. As they were admiring the site, a mysterious man approached. He asked who owned the place. Pharma replied that he did and asked if the man needed help. The man let out a laugh. His name was San, the head of the Commoners Physicians Guild. Instead of introducing himself properly, San mocked Pharma, saying he'd be better off running a candy shop for kids. Noor was about to jump in and defend Pharma, but he stopped her. With a smirk, Pharma told San that if he did open a candy shop, San would probably be his first customer. He then asked if he needed to register with the guild to be allowed to operate. San responded coldly. Registration was only for commoners' doctors. Just as things seemed calm, Noor suddenly stormed in and scolded the intruder with sharp words. She demanded to know what that nosy pest was doing there and ordered him to leave immediately. Her fierce tone worked like magic. San turned around and dashed off like his pants were on fire. Time flew by, and Pharma's clinic slowly transformed into a fully equipped healing hub. He had managed to purchase all the essential medical tools, but something was still missing, someone to handle the management and finances. That's when Talene popped in like she had been waiting for this moment her whole life. She proudly announced that she could read, solve math, and had memorized the entire multiplication table. According to her, no one was more qualified. Pharma appreciated her enthusiasm and agreed she was smart, but reminded her that the position required someone older and more experienced. When he returned home, however, he found the household drenched in sorrow. Everyone looked like they had just watched the saddest drama of the year. Turns out, Sadr, the loyal head servant and financial manager under his father, had retired that very day. His knees could no longer support him, and he had finally stepped down. Without hesitation, Pharma approached his father and proposed treating Sadr's knees so the old man could continue helping at the clinic. Biran agreed, and as a reward for Pharma's initiative, handed him a massive chest. When Pharma opened it, his jaw nearly hit the floor. It was full of money. Biran smiled and explained that running a clinic needed strong capital, and after Pharma's recent achievements, it was the least he could do. A month later, Pharma sat in his clinic with Noor and the newly recovered Sadr, but the place was quiet, eerily quiet. Only a few patients trickled in now and then. No one knew why the crowds weren't coming. That's when Talene barged in with a stack of papers. She'd taken it upon herself to visit homes all over the capital and gather feedback about the new clinic. Everyone was impressed by her bold initiative. Apparently, people had plenty of reasons for not visiting. Some were scared of the cost. Others thought the clinic was meant only for nobles because of the royal seal, and a few were intimidated by the guards posted outside. The team brainstormed until Sadr suggested putting up a board with consultation and treatment prices. That, he claimed, would erase people's doubts. Soon after, Biran and Lisa paid a surprise visit to check on Pharma's progress. He gave them a tour of the clinic, proudly showing off the floor plan. The first floor handled treatment and reception. The second had patient rooms. The third was for staff and storage. And the fourth, his pride and joy, was a research lab where new cures were being developed. Biran was impressed by the structure and detail, but Pharma still voiced his frustration over the lack of patience. That's when his mother casually dropped a game-changing suggestion. She pointed out that the cosmetics industry was booming in the kingdom. If Pharma could create an affordable beauty product, it would not only boost the clinic's visibility, but bring in a whole new type of customer. That idea lit a fire in Pharma's brain. He suddenly remembered a brilliant skincare project he had started back in his previous world, a product that could revolutionize beauty standards. Just as excitement filled the room, someone burst in yelling for help. A woman had collapsed and seemed to be on the verge of death. Without hesitation, Pharma rushed out with the man. At the scene, a massive crowd was blocking the carriage. Pharma pushed through, entered the carriage, and saw the poor woman barely breathing. Using his sacred eye, he examined her and found no signs of disease. However, he noticed something odd: deep cupping marks on her hands. The cause became clear. She had undergone a primitive and harmful bloodletting therapy that left her dangerously anemic. He immediately decided to bring her back to the clinic. Back at the clinic, the woman, now slightly better, explained what had happened. Her fiancé had pressured her to lighten her skin tone using cosmetics. When she visited a so-called doctor, the man tricked her into thinking she could lighten her skin by losing a specific amount of blood instead of using creams. Pharma was both furious and shocked. He treated her for the blood loss and made her a promise. He would create a completely safe cosmetic product that would enchant her from the very first use. True to his word, just a week later, the woman, Celine, returned to the clinic. Pharma had prepared a cream that was more than just safe. It reflected harmful rays, rejuvenated dead skin, and was gentle on all skin types. Celine was amazed beyond words. Thanks to her marketing skills and the affordable price, the product exploded in popularity. Pharma's clinic was suddenly overflowing with patients, and even though he had produced large quantities, they vanished in no time. He couldn't keep up with the demand. Soon, Celine returned with two of her friends looking for the miracle cream. Pharma had to break the news that it was out of stock, but he mentioned he was working on a new batch and needed help. That's when Celine pitched a brilliant idea. Open a separate branch dedicated solely to cosmetics. Pharma would handle production, and she would run sales and distribution. The plan would take pressure off the main clinic. Pharma was overjoyed, and Biran supported the idea, revealing that Celine's family had deep roots in the investment world. In just a few days, a separate cosmetics branch was opened under Celine's management. She even hired a team of professional doctors to assist with operations. Pharma could barely believe how successful the venture had become in such a short time. Not long after, Biran decided to take the whole family on a trip to the Arcel region, a land gifted to them by the princess herself. There, they met Kiro, the region's official and Biran's new assistant, who would provide detailed reports on medicinal herbs and regional trade. In the middle of this peaceful moment, Biran asked Pharma to check on Mila, who had wandered off to the beach even though she didn't know how to swim. Pharma rushed over and found Mila and Talene playing by the shoreline. Mila, grinning, asked for permission to go into the sea. Pharma hesitated but finally gave in, on one strict condition. They were not to go beyond the edge of the beach. Just as things seemed peaceful, Noor appeared beside Pharma and gently encouraged him to let the kids enjoy themselves. It was their first time at the sea, after all. She invited him to join them in the water. At that moment, Pharma's gaze lingered deeply on Mila, and everything around him blurred as a memory surged forward. The scene shifted to a painful flashback. His sister from the first world, the warmth of their time together, and the haunting helplessness he had felt as her illness slowly stole her away forever. Suddenly, the present came crashing back, and so did disaster. The calm sea turned violent without warning. A deadly current surged forward and yanked Mila beneath the waves. She screamed, panicked and helpless. Pharma instinctively dived in, thrashing against the water, trying to reach her. But the current was too strong, and Mila slipped further into the depths. Her consciousness faded as she drowned. Pharma, filled with anguish, shouted internally that he had already lost one sister. He wouldn't let it happen again. And then, something changed. A monstrous surge of energy burst from him. The sea trembled. A deafening boom erupted, creating a colossal crater in the ocean. Water parted as a massive barrier formed, separating them from the deadly current. Noor opened her eyes slowly, shocked beyond belief. There stood Pharma, holding the unconscious Mila on his shoulder, cloaked in radiant energy and commanding the ocean itself. He returned her safely to the shore. Mila coughed, awakening, but her eyes were filled with fear. Noor, still trying to process what she had seen, asked how he had done it. Pharma admitted he didn't know. Maybe it was one of the sacred arts, but Noor shook her head. In all her knowledge, nothing in this world could explain such a feat. Later that night, Pharma sat alone in his room, haunted by the day's events and Talon's terrified expression. Suddenly, the door creaked open. Talon entered quietly and asked if he needed anything before bed. He hesitated, then softly apologized for scaring her. But she just smiled and said he hadn't scared her, she was simply amazed. The next morning brought no peace. Pharma stood in the clinic with Noor, commenting that even after a week's break for the Arcel trip, people still lined up outside. But something wasn't right. Two masked figures stood nearby, acting strangely. Pharma approached, offered assistance, but they said nothing and slipped away without a word. Their presence left an uneasy tension. But the next morning brought catastrophe. One of the guards arrived early to open the clinic. Just then, a speeding carriage charged in and exploded. The news hit Pharma and Biran like a punch. Biran immediately resolved to report everything to the princess, while Pharma rushed to the scene. When asked if he suspected anyone, Pharma briefly thought of San, the head of the Doctor's Guild, and those masked figures, but he said nothing. Arriving at the ruins, Pharma stared at the wreckage in silence. Rebuilding would take time, maybe weeks. But then, unexpectedly, hope arrived. Young men whom he had treated in the past appeared and offered to help. Soon, more people arrived. Grateful patients and supporters. They stood with him, refusing to leave until the clinic was restored. In the middle of this, a little girl entered crying. Her father had fainted, she said, and was about to die. She begged Pharma to help. Without hesitation, he agreed, trusting his community to handle the clinic. As they traveled farther and farther from the city, something felt wrong. He asked the girl for the exact location, and that's when he realized she had disappeared. Then suddenly, a ring of masked figures surrounded him. These were not ordinary attackers. They were a sect of powerful temple priests, possibly more influential than the royal family. One of them had witnessed Pharma's sea incident and noted something chilling. He cast no shadow. To them, that could mean only one thing. He was a demon. They were here to eliminate him. Pharma denied the accusation, insisting he was human, but the high priest barked an order, hands up, take 3 steps back. Pharma complied. Instantly, a magical seal blazed beneath his feet, trapping him in a glowing prison of energy. But in the blink of an eye, it disappeared. The priests gasped. One of them shouted that this was impossible. The seal was meant to imprison demons. If it had failed, it meant only one thing. The man before them was no demon. Yet they refused to believe it. One priest attacked, conjuring a ferocious whirlwind of fire that closed in from every direction. It should have ended there, but Pharma raised a glowing barrier that shattered the flames effortlessly. Another priest cast ice magic, but the spells disintegrated before touching him, dissolved by the light in his sacred eye. They snapped. All the priests unleashed every spell they knew. Earth-shaking explosions, searing beams, violent winds. The ground shook, the forest trembled. But when the smoke cleared, Pharma stood completely untouched, encased in a shimmering shell of ice, calm as ever. He finally spoke, warning them that they had brought this upon themselves. Then, with a single movement, a storm of divine power burst forth from his body, vaporizing their attacks and knocking the high priest to his knees. Pharma stood like an avenging spirit, commanding silence. Any wrong move and their fate would be sealed. But then, something unexpected happened. The high priest noticed a sacred mark glowing on Pharma's shoulder, a holy seal. It was the mark of holy light, a gift granted only to the chosen. All the priests dropped to their knees. They begged forgiveness. Pharma stood in disbelief, still unsure why they had suddenly submitted. He hadn't fully understood the mark's significance himself, but one thing was clear. The world had changed its view of him forever. Just when things seemed to calm down, the high priest unexpectedly drew a dagger from his robes, intent on ending his own life to atone for the sin of attacking a divine being without realizing the truth. But in a split second, Pharma appeared before him and stopped the blade, declaring that no harm would come to anyone as long as he was alive. However, it was soon revealed that the high priest had suffered a grave internal injury and needed urgent surgery. Pharma, though honest about his lack of surgical expertise, decided he had no choice. Time was against them. A large tent was quickly assembled, and the high priest was carefully moved inside. Pharma wasted no time. He began preparing anesthesia, making sure to test for allergies before proceeding. Once everything was ready, he performed the operation with precision. Moments later, he emerged from the tent, calmly informing the priest that the surgery had been successful. He instructed them to transfer the patient to the temple and ensure proper care. The priests, overwhelmed with gratitude, bowed deeply, their hearts full of appreciation for the man they had once tried to kill. Days passed, and the high priest, now fully recovered, visited Pharma's clinic once more, but this time as a friend. In his hands was a gift box. Inside lay a magical staff, not just any relic, but one of the temple's sacred treasures. The priest explained that its powers were unknown, and it only responded to those deemed worthy. As soon as Pharma touched it, the staff radiated a powerful light, recognizing him as its rightful wielder. Noor, astonished by the sight, eagerly asked if she could hold it too. Pharma handed it over with a smile, but the staff slipped straight through her hands like mist, crashing to the ground. The priest chuckled and said only the worthy could grasp it. That alone proved Pharma wasn't just another healer. Grinning, Pharma picked up the staff again, and suddenly had a wild idea. Without warning, he mounted it like a broomstick and launched himself into the air. As the visit concluded, it became clear that the temple had no hand in the attack on Pharma's clinic. The high priest vowed to uncover the real culprit. Before leaving, he handed Pharma a talisman, a divine charm that nullified holy energy. The result was immediate. Pharma's shadow, previously absent due to his divine nature, returned to the ground. He looked human once again. Overjoyed, he thanked the priest from the bottom of his heart. With the priest's blessing and his promise fulfilled, Pharma set off with Mila and Talon on a tour of the kingdom, a promise he had made to his sister. Their journey led them through lively markets where they overheard a girl asking a pharmacist why the items from Pharma's clinic weren't sold there. She argued that it would save patients both time and energy, but the doctor shook his head, replying that the guild would never allow it. Doing so could lead to penalties, even the closure of their pharmacy. Pharma, listening from nearby, took this to heart. He quickly gathered Mila and Talon and walked away deep in thought. And then, like a lightning bolt, an idea struck. He would create his own medical guild, one that wouldn't be shackled by corrupt systems, a guild that would allow medicine to spread freely throughout the kingdom. Noor's excitement was palpable. Mr. Saad, ever reliable, promised to handle the legal side as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, trouble was brewing elsewhere. San, head of the Public Doctors Guild, called a secret meeting. His goal? Crush Pharma's clinic completely. The truth finally came to light. It was San who had orchestrated the previous attack. With Pharma's methods making real cures accessible, San's profits had dwindled. To him, this wasn't medicine, it was business. And business was dying. The room roared with applause, except for one man. Dr. Breed remained silent, clearly disturbed. 1 week later, Breed was seen rushing through the streets, carrying his sick daughter on his back. She was barely conscious. He banged on the guild's doors, but no one responded. Then, as if fate had intervened, he ran into Pharma. Pharma instantly understood the urgency. He told Breed to follow him to the clinic. Once there, he began asking quick but crucial questions. Her name, age, when she last ate. He used his sacred eye to examine the girl and found that a severe cold had worsened into a critical condition. Breed watched in awe as Pharma measured everything down to her weight to ensure an exact dosage. The girl was admitted to the clinic for observation. By evening, her condition had improved dramatically. As they prepared to leave, Yako handed Breed medicine for 5 days. The next day, Breed returned holding a single coin. He explained he couldn't afford proper treatment, but vowed to pay back whatever he could. Pharma simply replied that the cost was 1 coin. Breed stood frozen. How could such expert care be so cheap? It was then he understood the real reason the guild feared Pharma. At home, his wife Lena rejoiced that their daughter was recovering. Breed told her it was Pharma who had treated her, describing him as a genius with both divine power and unmatched knowledge. He offered care not for profit, but for the sake of healing. Breed broke down, confessing he wished he could help people like Pharma did. Lena gently reminded him that going against the guild meant losing his license and his job, but the thought lingered in Breed's mind. Elsewhere, San held another furious meeting. Despite everything they had done, Pharma's clinic kept growing. He now even had a cosmetics branch, and rumors hinted at a third one opening soon. San demanded new strategies to crush the competition. This time, Breed stood up. He had had enough. He told them their hatred was blinding them. Pharma's clinic treated everyone, noble or commoner, without discrimination. Even the poor received care. That, he said, was the true mission of medicine. Not exploitation, not greed. He told them about his daughter and how Pharma had saved her when the guild turned them away. He called out their corruption, their ignorance, and their failure to uphold their oaths. San was enraged but said nothing. Deep down, he had already marked Breed as a traitor, and the very next day, the consequences arrived. Breed sat in silence before the charred remains of his pharmacy, reduced to ashes. Every shelf destroyed, every medicine gone. His name had been erased from the guild's records, and he was permanently banned from practicing medicine. By sheer coincidence, Pharma happened to be passing through the area when he spotted a familiar face, Braid, slumped and beaten. One glance was enough. He rushed over and demanded to know what had happened, but nothing could have prepared him for the bomb Braid dropped. Not only was he a licensed pharmacist, but the person who had ruined him was none other than San, the guild master himself. Once Braid laid out the entire nightmare, Pharma didn't just nod sympathetically, he dropped a surprise of his own. He revealed that he had recently submitted a proposal to the princess to establish a new guild, and guess what? The approval had already come through. Pharma then offered Braid the honor of being the very first official member. Staggered, Braid could barely hold back tears. This time, though, they were tears of joy. Fast forward a week, and the pharmacy that once lay in ruins now looked brand new. Pharma had stocked the place with his latest line of medications, transforming it into a hub of healing. The reopening day arrived, and while Braid was jittery beyond belief, his daughter's encouragement helped him face the moment. But the real shock came when he opened the door. A massive crowd had gathered, cheering him on. He stood frozen, overwhelmed by the sight. It was a moment too beautiful for words. Meanwhile, at a peaceful breakfast table, Pharma was enjoying a quiet meal with his family when Baran received a letter. The sender? Vero, Pharma's older brother. The moment Baran read its contents, his expression darkened. He urged Pharma to follow him to the office without delay. Once inside, Baran broke the news. The International Trade Fair was just around the corner. An entire month of non-stop commerce with merchants pouring in from every corner of the world. Sounds great, except for one minor issue. Vero's letter warned of a catastrophic new disease, one so lethal that victims perished within days. It had already surfaced in a neighboring nation, claiming over 1,000 lives in a single week. The rapid spread meant it was highly contagious. What's worse, despite Vero's research, they had yet to identify what the disease even was. His entire lab team had fallen one by one, and eventually the facility had been sealed and burned down. The fear was that the infection could sneak into the capital through goods or traveling merchants. And where was this year's trade fair being hosted? None other than Arsul, the region under Baran's direct control. Pharma's mind immediately jumped to the illnesses of his previous world. He asked if any records or detailed accounts were available. Baran replied there weren't, but Vero had mentioned scrolls that contained microscopic images captured during testing. Pharma didn't waste a second and requested copies of those scrolls. Back at his clinic, he brought Noor into the loop. They discussed ways to block the spread before the fair began. Then, Noor tossed out a wild idea. Just cancel the whole market. Simple, right? Just then, Talon burst in with another letter from Vero. Pharma opened it and found a microscopic image inside. His eyes widened. It wasn't just bad, it was a nightmare reborn. He recognized it instantly. This was the Black Death, the plague that had once annihilated half of the world's population in his former life. Without wasting another breath, Pharma rushed to Baran and dropped the name of the disease. But Baran didn't flinch. He had suspected the same and had already been researching it. According to old legends, this illness had always been dismissed as myth, an unbeatable curse with no cure. If it made its way into the capital, it would mean total collapse. Then, Pharma stunned him with a dramatic reveal. He declared that he wasn't just theorizing, he had already created a cure. Even more impressive, he had distributed it across several pharmacies in the royal capital. Baran was speechless. But Pharma wasn't done. He explained that curing was just part of the mission. The real battle was containment. For that, he needed royal support. So, together, they visited the princess. They laid everything on the table, every horrifying detail. Their request was urgent and sweeping. All ships were to be held at port, all international trade suspended, and all commercial contact with foreign nations cut off immediately. The princess didn't hesitate. She gave the order on the spot and instructed her minister to follow it to the letter. Pharma promised her that he would lead a medical team to the port, establish inspection points, and personally oversee every shipment and merchant. If the plague appeared, he'd treat it on the spot. The princess, unfazed, expressed her full trust in him. Later, Pharma got to work designing a new microscope, one that allowed safe distance observation. It was a much-needed upgrade for testing such a deadly pathogen. He taught Braid how to use it and checked their medicine stock. Thankfully, the kingdom was well prepared, and best of all, the treatment would be distributed for free. Pharma had funded the entire operation from his own pocket. Once all preparations were complete, he and Noor set out for the trade port, ready to confront the threat head-on. As Pharma arrived at the port, a group of physicians joined him, handing over a detailed report about the ships docked and the number of crew aboard each. He thanked them with a nod, then decided to personally inspect every vessel, just to be sure. At the first ship, the captain was already losing his mind. He was shouting nonsense at full volume, more out of frustration than anger, having been detained without knowing the reason. Pharma, calm as ever, explained that everything was done for their safety and gently asked the captain to breathe and relax. He then stepped aboard, gave the ship a full inspection, examined every crew member and every corner of the vessel. Only after confirming it was safe did he permit them to dock. Moving to the second ship, things started heating up. Before Pharma could even step onto the deck, the captain began yelling from afar, complaining that the cargo would rot if the ship stayed anchored any longer. Just as the noise peaked, another captain jumped into the chaos, demanding that his ship be inspected first. A shouting match broke out between them, and both, refusing to wait, decided to storm the shore without inspection. For a moment, it looked like Pharma was about to be crushed between two angry captains. But just then, thunder roared, not from the skies, but from cannons. A barrage of warning shots lit up the sea, and the surprise? They came from a ship commanded by a former patient of Pharma, a naval officer now secretly sent by the princess to protect him. With a stone-cold voice, the captain warned that if anyone barked again, he'd blast them and their ships into fish food. Pharma, of course, was delighted to have a cannon-toting ally at his back. With things back under control, inspections resumed. Thankfully, no signs of disease were found, but peace didn't last long. Kerr, the deputy from the Arcel region, suddenly stormed into the tent, panic written all over his face. He reported that one of the detained ships had sneaked through an illegal coastal route and unloaded cargo at a village. Now people were dropping dead one by one. The villagers believed it was the work of a demon. Pharma immediately understood the situation. That ship had been infected. He wasted no time preparing to leave. Noor, ever ready to help, offered to join, but Pharma stopped her. He told her she was needed more at the port. Then, with a swift motion, he summoned his sacred staff and blasted off into the sky like a magical missile. But Fortune clearly had a strange sense of humor. Mid-flight, a bird almost collided with him. In the chaos, Pharma lost control of the staff, spun out of balance, and crash-landed right into a tree, or so it seemed. His body passed straight through it. The tree had been an illusion, one of the many mysterious powers of the sacred staff. Soon, Pharma arrived at the outskirts of the plagued village, just as a group of terrified villagers was trying to flee. They were convinced that something supernatural was murdering them. His sudden, flying appearance did not help. When they saw him descend from the sky, cloaked in mystery, their suspicion only deepened. Someone shouted to identify himself, asking how he appeared out of nowhere. Pharma simply asked them to return to the village and assured them he would explain everything, but fear turned into paranoia. One man cried that he was the evil spirit trying to trap them. In an instant, they grabbed sticks, whatever they could find, ready to fight. Pharma sighed. Talking wasn't working, so he tapped his staff to the ground. Ice erupted around them like walls of a fortress, sealing the area completely. The villagers froze in awe, literally and figuratively. That level of magic wasn't something they saw every day. Finally, Pharma introduced himself as a royal physician, sent to help them. He declared that no one would leave the village without medical checks. His serious tone and supernatural presence finally calmed them down. Inside one of the homes, the villagers gathered and asked what came next. Pharma rolled out a map and explained his plan. The village would be divided into 3 zones based on infection severity, so they could focus resources where needed. He then moved to one of the quarantine houses, where the situation was grim. The room was packed with the sick and dying, with overwhelmed doctors doing their best. As soon as Pharma entered, one of the doctors snapped, telling him to get out immediately. But another doctor intervened. He recognized Pharma and announced to the room that this was the man they had been praying for, a divine healer, the real deal. Without wasting a second, Pharma began examining the patients. That's when he stumbled upon something absurd, a guy lying in bed with just a regular cold. Pharma frowned and asked why he was even there. The man gave a sheepish look and didn't answer. Regardless, Pharma focused on the real patients, treating each one carefully. He even used his divine power to boost the medicine's effectiveness, working side by side with the local doctors. After stabilizing the situation, Pharma made an urgent request. The group that had passed through this village and headed toward the capital had likely carried the plague. He instructed the doctors to track them down, destroy everything they carried, and treat them before they reached the city. As for Pharma, he stayed behind to continue healing the rest of the villagers. Eventually, he managed to cure every last one of them. Before leaving, he assigned guards to stand at the village gates and ordered that no one would be allowed in or out unless they were fully healed. Just before he took off, Pharma told them the ice barrier would help speed up recovery and instructed them to send word to the capital immediately if anything went wrong. With that, he summoned his sacred staff once more, promised to return, and vanished into the sky like a glowing streak of hope. While soaring through the skies, Pharma spotted a fire blazing along the road below. Curious and concerned, he descended rapidly to investigate. To his surprise, the doctors he had dispatched were already there, carrying out his orders perfectly. The merchants responsible for the plague had their goods burned to ashes. Pharma approached the merchants with a serious tone, informing them that they were all infected with the Black Death and would not receive treatment until they answered some questions. He asked how many wagons had passed through the village and what they carried. The merchants revealed there were 4 wagons, 3 loaded with fabric and furnishings, and 1 transporting animals, specifically white squirrels. Pharma's heart sank. The white squirrel was notorious as the plague's primary carrier in the kingdom. Even worse, 5 holy knights had traveled with those goods, entered the village, and then vanished without a trace. This confirmed Pharma's worst suspicion. The plague was no accident. Someone was orchestrating the whole disaster. He ordered the doctors to treat the merchants immediately, then set off for the royal capital. Meanwhile, back in the city, Taline was busy distributing painkillers and educating the public on health safety. Breed, analyzing samples taken from merchants at the city gate, made a horrifying discovery. Some were infected. He called for an immediate quarantine and rushed to the gate with his medical team, only to be caught in chaos. Guards were falling as holy knights suddenly stormed the gates. The knights, carrying wooden boxes, unleashed white squirrels into the crowd. One knight used his powers to scatter the animals, spreading panic. Breed realized this was the beginning of the kingdom's nightmare. He sounded the alarm across the city, ordering everyone to stay indoors. Some guards fought back, but the knight's magic was overwhelming. One used wind spells to fling guards through the air. Just as the situation seemed hopeless, the high priest appeared, striking the ground with divine force. Sacred energy exploded outward, binding the knights in magical seals. At that moment, Pharma arrived at the capital and immediately inspected the spreading infection through his sacred eye. The culprit was clear: the white squirrels. He rushed to the gate, found Breed, ensured he was unharmed, and together they confronted the knights. Under questioning, the knights revealed chilling news. They had been forced to spread the disease by a demon powerful enough to wipe out thousands with a single strike. This demon had kidnapped their families and threatened their lives. The description stunned Baran. A flashback revealed a former close friend named Tajo, who had lost all humanity. Obsessively bent on world domination, Tajo conducted horrific experiments, was stripped of his medical title, imprisoned, then vanished. Now it seemed he had returned for revenge. Suddenly, Pharma sensed a terrifying energy nearby. Activating his sacred eye, he spotted a dreadful specter looming over his clinic. He rushed there, with Baran close behind, both aware that peace was over. Meanwhile, Talon and Sadr were running low on medicine. Talon decided to fetch more from the clinic, with Sadr accompanying her. Neither knew the nightmare awaiting them. At the clinic, Talon found the lab windows wide open and all the medicine missing. She assumed Pharma had taken it, but then Sadr appeared, only to be struck down by Tajo, who had followed them. Sadr collapsed in a pool of blood, his fate sealed. Pharma arrived, used his sacred eye to locate Tajo, and stormed into the lab. To his shock, Biran was already there, standing tall and commanding Pharma to save Talon and Sadr while he confronted the demon alone. Pharma obeyed, while Biran bravely attacked Tajo. The battle was brutal, but Tajo was on another level, blocking every blow and crushing Biran with one strike. Pharma treated Talon and Sadr, then turned back to face Tajo, who threatened to burn down the clinic with white phosphorus. Pharma reacted instantly, neutralizing the chemicals with his powers. He vowed Tajo would pay for his crimes, from spreading plague to attacking innocent people. With a decisive strike from his sacred staff, Pharma launched a cataclysmic blast that obliterated Tajo, erasing him from existence. A purifying wave spread across the kingdom, cleansing the land of every trace of disease. Peace was finally restored, only better. But that's where the video ends. But before we wrap things up, a huge shout out to the squad, who always show up like true MVPs. You all are legends, and if you're hyped for what's coming, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss a second. Drop your wildest theories in the comments, because next time, it's gonna be straight